Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you follow environmental news, climate change, habitat loss, those are the big ones usually. But today, we're really digging into something else, a threat that's, well, it's not just rising fast, it's already a huge global problem. We're talking about invasive alien species, IAS. That's silent but incredibly costly disaster.
Exactly. And our focus today, our deep dive, it's really centered on this massive synthesis of knowledge. It comes from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES. We're specifically looking at their thematic assessment report, summarized in a key perspective piece. It's titled, Curbing the Major and Growing Threats from Invasive Alien Species is Urgent and Achievable, and it was led by Helene Roy.
Okay, so let's just get this straight from the start. This isn't, one isolated study. This is the big picture, the global consensus, pretty much.
It really is. Synthesized from data involving 143 member states. And their goal was basically to gather solid evidence on how bad this is. And crucially, what can we actually do about it? What are the realistic options? So yeah, we're giving you the essential rundown.
And the scale of this IPBES assessment, that's what makes it such a landmark, potentially pivotal for policy everywhere. It's the first really comprehensive global look at biological invasions. It pulls together over 13,000 scientific papers, reports in like 15 languages. And importantly, it includes indigenous and local knowledge, too, across all kinds of ecosystems. That level of synthesis, it demands attention.
And what it tells us is, frankly, terrifying. IAS aren't some side issue. They are explicitly named as one of the top 5 drivers of biodiversity loss worldwide. This is right at the heart of the crisis.
Absolutely. And when you look at the numbers, the specifics, well, they're staggering. IAS have directly contributed to 60% of known global extinctions.
60%. Just pause on that. That number alone is huge. It is, but then you zoom in on the really vulnerable spots like remote islands, places with unique species found nowhere else.
Yeah.
There, invasive alien species are the main culprit in 90% of documented global extinctions.
90%. Wow. The scale of that. I mean, you think of examples like the brown tree snake, Boiga irregularis on Guam. It just wiped out nearly all the forest birds. Yeah. A single introduction causing ecological devastation.
And it's not just ecological. The economic hit is massive, too. The global cost, just from biological invasions, it topped U.S. $423 billion. That was back in 2019.
Hey, Ron, $423 billion in 1 year. That sounds almost made up.
It's enormous, and what's really shocking is the trend, that cost. It's been quadrupling every single decade since 1970.
Quadrupling each decade, so we're paying exponentially more just trying to manage this.
Exactly, and bear in mind that $423 billion figure, it's likely a conservative estimate. It doesn't even touch the intangible costs, losing cultural connections to species, health impacts, things like that.
Okay, that really drives home the scale. Now, before we get into the trends, we should probably clarify terms. Alien versus invasive. The report makes a key distinction there.
Yes, that's crucial. So an alien species, that's just any species moved by humans into a new area outside its natural range. The assessment figures there are at least 37,000 established alien species globally, introduced by us.
Okay, 37,000.
Then you have the subset that causes problems. The invasive alien species, or IAS, these are the ones, over 3,500 species globally, that spread like wildfire and have documented negative effects on biodiversity, ecosystems, you name it.
Right, so 37,000 are maybe potential threats, and 3,500 are the ones actively causing damage now. And that 37,000 number isn't static, is it?
Oh, not at all. The report confirms about 200 new alien species get established globally every single year. It's relentless, driven by trade, travel.
200 a year. And if that keeps up, what's the outlook?
Well, assuming things continue as they are, the projection is for the total number of alien species to jump by about 36% by 2050 compared to 2005. But here's a really interesting wrinkle. The problems we see today. They often reflect introductions and drivers from decades ago.
And that leads us to something I found really striking, maybe even alarming, in the assessment, this idea of invasion debt. Can you unpack that? What does that long-term legacy actually mean?
Right, invasion debt. It highlights this lag time, sometimes a really long lag, between when a species arrives and when we see its full impact, ecologically or economically. For some things, like a disease, the impact might be fast. But for, say, invasive trees or maybe some marine species, it can take decades. They need time to mature, spread, reach densities where they really start changing things.
Wait a second. So you're saying we could still be dealing with the consequences, paying the price for, plants brought over or ships arriving way back in the 70s or 80s?
Absolutely. That invasive tree introduced in the 80s might only now be starting to really outcompete native forests over large areas. So just looking at current damage levels, it likely underestimates what's coming down the pipeline. We're still paying off ecological debts from the past and adding 200 new potential debts every year.
That completely reframes it. It's
Yeah.
not just what's happening now. It's like a delayed fuse burning. What drives this accumulation of debt? What are the pathways?
The data shows a strong link. The volume of goods we import. That's tightly correlated with the number of alien species showing up. The spread really maps onto global shipping routes, air traffic networks, and a big one now is e-commerce.
Online shopping.
Yeah, the online trade in plants, exotic pets, sometimes illegal, is a growing pathway. It's harder to track, and things can arrive as accidental hitchhikers, too.
And we also need to consider how these invasions interact with other big environmental pressures, like climate change.
Right, they don't happen in a vacuum? No, they absolutely amplify each other. Climate warming, for instance, it lets some IAS move into places that used to be too cold for them. They get a foothold.
So climate change is kind of rolling out the welcome mat for invaders in new areas. Can you give an example?
A clear one is the poleward expansion. We're seeing species establishing in Arctic and Antarctic areas now, and maybe even more striking, in some mountain ranges. Warming and other changes are letting invasive species move uphill, expand their range, twice as fast as native species can keep up or migrate.
Twice as fast. The natives just get overwhelmed. And the report also mentioned invaders can actually make climate impacts worse, right? A feedback loop.
Exactly. A really damaging one involves invasive grasses adapted to fire. They build up fuel loads, which then drives bigger, hotter wildfires, especially with climate change drying things out. And what happens after a big fire?
Open ground, disturbed soil.
Perfect conditions for more invasion. So the invader actually helps create the conditions for its own spread, piggybacking on the climate crisis it's intensifying.
Okay, before we talk solutions, there was another really significant point about who manages the land, specifically looking at indigenous peoples and local communities.
Yes, a crucial insight for governance. The assessment found that globally, lands managed or inhabited by indigenous peoples tend to have significantly fewer alien species, up to 30% fewer, around 2,300 species less than other comparable areas.
30% fewer. Even accounting for things like remoteness.
Even after controlling for those factors, it suggests there's something about the stewardship, the customary governance that fosters resilience.
What might that be?
It likely comes down to long-term, localized knowledge and practices. Maybe more diverse land use, selective harvesting, less reliance on the big commercial pathways that bring invaders in. The big takeaway for policy is that effective strategies have to respect and incorporate indigenous knowledge, rights, and governance, using frameworks like the CARE principles, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, ethics.
That makes sense. Okay, so acknowledging all this complexity, this massive growing threat,
Yeah.
what can actually be done? Is containment even realistic? The assessment laid out a hierarchy, didn't it?
It did. And the top priority, the most powerful tool, prevention. The report's absolutely clear. Preventing species from arriving in the first place is by far the best, most cost-effective approach. Much cheaper than trying to manage them once they're established and spreading.
So prevention, what does that look like on the ground?
It means investing seriously, long-term, in managing the pathways. Strong border biosecurity, like quarantine services. It means regulations targeting high-risk routes, treating ship ballast water, inspecting nursery plants, cargo screening, things that stop introductions at the source.
But inevitably some slip through. We get 200 new ones a year. So what about when prevention fails? Preparedness, response.
Preparedness is next. Early detection is key. That needs national surveillance systems, maybe using citizen science. And if an IAS does establish, eradication is sometimes possible. The report looked at over 1,500 attempts, and 88% were successful, especially for vertebrates and especially on islands. So it can be done. Also, classical biological control using a natural enemy has worked pretty well for certain plants and insects in over 60% of cases studied.
Okay, so there are success stories. What about new tech? Is that helping us tackle this invasion debt?
Yeah, emerging tools are definitely boosting our capabilities, things like environmental DNA, eDNA.
How does that work?
You can take a water sample or soil sample and detect tiny traces of an invader's DNA, maybe a larva or spores. It makes finding new arrivals much easier, much earlier, which is crucial for any eradication hope.
Right, catching it before it spreads widely. You also mentioned CRISPR.
Yeah, CRISPR gene editing holds potential for developing very specific controls, though it's still early days and, raises ethical discussions. And beyond genetics, you've got AI helping with analyzing surveillance data, remote sensing, spotting large infestations, even robotics for control in tough spots.
Okay, that covers management tools. Let's talk policy. This is a global problem, cost of billions, quadrupling. It screams for integrated governance, right?
Absolutely. The call is for urgent cooperative action across sectors. We need better coordination internationally. Regulatory tools need to work together across agriculture, health, trade, environment areas that often operate in silos.
Makes sense.
And the paper pushes beyond just one health, which connects human, animal, environment. It promotes a broader concept, one biosecurity.
One biosecurity. How's that different?
It explicitly brings plant health into that integrated picture because so many major invasions involve plants or things affecting plants, pests, diseases, which then cascade into ecological and economic crises. So a truly holistic view. And underpinning all this is better information sharing. We need open, updated, compatible data systems like the Global Register of Introduced and Invasive Species to fill the gaps.
Speaking of gaps, no assessment is perfect. What were the main limitations identified? Where do we still lack knowledge?
Yeah, they were upfront about that. There are definite knowledge gaps, often due to historical biases and where research happened. We know less about certain groups, like invasive invertebrates, microbes, also less data from the marine environment, which is vast and hard to study. And geographically, there are gaps too, particularly in parts of Africa and Central Asia.
So future research needs to target those areas, those organisms, and build capacity there.
Exactly. Filling those gaps, helping developing countries build their research base, integrating different kinds of knowledge, scientific, local, indigenous. That's all essential. It's needed to make policy robust and management effective. And ultimately, it's what makes ambitious targets, like Target 6 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, seem achievable.
Right, that target aims to significantly reduce IES impacts by 2030. It sounds like this IPBES assessment really provides the evidence, the roadmap to actually get there.
I think that's the key takeaway. The threat is huge, it's growing, the costs are astronomical, over $423 billion a year and rising fast. But critically, we do have evidence-based tools. We know what works. Especially focusing on prevention, the assessment lays out a clear path if the political will and resources are committed.
A clear, if challenging, path. Okay, excellent summary. Let's wrap up with that final provocative thought, thinking about that concept of invasion debt, that long delay. We know today's introductions can become tomorrow's disasters. So I want you, the listener, to think about the alien species you see around you now. Maybe an ornamental plant that seems fine, an insect you saw that wasn't familiar. Which of these currently established, perhaps seemingly harmless species might actually be the ticking time bomb, the one that explodes into a major ecological and economic crisis by, say, 2050? We're still learning the true weight, the long legacy of moving life around the planet. Thank you for joining us for this really crucial deep dive. We'll see you next time.